The spirit of entrepreneurship is usually identifying problems and figuring out how to solve them. And yet we encounter so much resistance as we try to make those positive changes. Yeah. And to recognize that that's just part of the game. Like it's a feature, not a bug, something to be expected whenever you're trying to push the ball forward.
If you're just listening to this, but you're never taking any action, and maybe not even us, but you're listening, you're reading books, you're listening to all these different kinds of things of advice, but you're not taking time to implement it, then it's just head knowledge, and you're never going to change the trajectory, or you're never going to be able to accomplish those goals. You have to start taking steps. So yes, listen, yes, learn, then evaluate, which is, I think we've spent some time talking about evaluating today, and finally, go get after it. Welcome to the Abundant Journey podcast, where we talk with incredible entrepreneurs who give world-class advice from their own journeys. I'm your host, Nick James, and I'm a commercial banker turned business owner, along with my co-host, Nick Aufenkamp. We want to help you grow and scale your business while not losing sight of what matters most. Join us as we learn from the experts what it takes to grow $1 million business. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Abundant Journey podcast, Abundant Journey YouTube channel. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching and hanging out with us today. I'm your host, Nick James, as always, along with partner in crime. I have not said that one in a while, Nick Aufenkamp. It is a new year. And what better time than to do a little bit of reflection on the last couple episodes we have recently had. Nick, how are you, brother?
Dude, good. Can't believe 2025 already. And it feels like the last quarter of 2024 just blitzed by. And so my head is still spinning a little bit, but super excited for everything that this year brings, both for each of us personally, as well as for what's in store with Abundant Journey. How are you, my friend?
Man, I am doing great. I was thinking back on how it has been a year of change. Spoiler alert, we have a fourth child coming, and is happening soon, which is crazy. I quit the W-2 world and bought a business. You have been blazing your trail as an entrepreneur. We've continued to have amazing guests. Man, 24 was crazy, and here we are in 2025, and I think we're just getting started. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I do love your approach to change, which is just, let's do everything all at once. And no, I say that tongue in cheek. I really do respect everything that you guys have set into motion over the last 6, 7, 8, 9 months, and seeing a lot of that come to fruition this year already, and I'm sure we'll only continue. So as we move into 2025,
absolutely,
so it's very exciting.
No, it really is. And, so we've spent some time kind of laying the groundwork for where we're going this year. We've talked a little bit about doing some more coaching calls with guests. We've talked about doing some more of documenting our journey. And really, I want to dive in today. We're going back a little bit. We have done some recap episodes in the past, and I'm really excited to do one of those today because we have had some amazing guests on. And I think what we're trying to do today is really just reflect on a few of those recent episodes toward the end of 2024 and draw out some things that I think are applicable to our listeners and our audience, both as they're growing and scaling their businesses. But in addition to that, things we're working on implementing ourselves.
100%, man. Let's do it.
Dude, I love it. Well, so in thinking back, one of the conversations that was one of my favorite was when we had Chris Jansen on, and she is a life coach. She is an author. And man, that conversation was just rich with her experiences. One, she had spent time as a coach with Tony Robbins. And of course, I think anytime you're around that guy and have an opportunity to be around him and the people that he surrounds himself with is tremendous. And so we wanted to really glean from her insights and wisdom there. But on top of that, she branched off years ago and started focusing on being a life coach for high performing entrepreneurs and high achieving entrepreneurs. And so she is around some of the best. And that was a great discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris was fantastic. I'll be honest. And if she listens to this, I'm sorry, Chris, but I've always been a little bit skeptical of the whole like life coach deal. And, she blew all of my categories for what a life coach actually is, with how seriously she takes it, as well as with how deep her understanding of the human psyche and different pathologies that we create for ourselves that get us stuck in ruts. She really has an awesome handle on that. And I've really appreciated how much of that just comes out of her own story, her own struggle with self-sabotage. And that was a unique angle. Like, we haven't talked with many entrepreneurs, business owners about the role of self-sabotage and the way that that stops them from reaching their full potential in business and in life.
Yeah. I think you're spot on there. And in thinking back on that episode, I loved the dynamic that she was willing to go honest and transparent with her story. And I think that brought the power to what she was saying, because it's one thing to coach somebody and it's another thing to have lived through it yourself and to know the feelings and, to understand the struggles and the hill to climb. And so I think you're right. That self-sabotaging thing was one of the moments for me in that episode that I really have gone back to and spent a lot of time thinking about what are ways that I self-sabotage. And I'm going to put you on the spot in a minute, but I'll take the brunt of it at first.
I appreciate the heads up.
You think about January, there's the New Year's resolutions, there's the new goals, and people are like, I'm going to tackle XYZ. And within a matter of weeks, sometimes not even that long, they're back into old ruts and old habits. And so we really, I think, recognizing that we're prone to self-sabotaging, we're prone to seeking comfort. We are very quick to go back to what feels comfortable and what feels, like that normal routine, and what feels safe is often the things we gravitate to. At least that's how I feel, and again, I think just trying to lean into that as a business owner. One of the things that I can find myself doing is saying, well, I'll get to that later. I think, if the list of to-dos gets too overwhelming and there's too many things on it, I oftentimes just push things down further on the list and say, well, I'll get to it later, get to it later, get to it later. And then I look up and I find that a simple task that should have taken literally 5 to 10 minutes is something I've delayed for months on end. And I think I even shared that in an episode, not even from a business standpoint, but from the fact that when we remodeled our bathroom, we didn't put the new lights in front of the mirror. We literally had purchased that. Actually, we hadn't purchased them. We didn't have lights in front of the mirrors in the bathroom for 2 years. And it took 30 minutes to go on Amazon, pick the lights we wanted, and then it took another 30 minutes to install. So an hour-long task, we were without lights in our bathroom for literally 2 years. And so I think that showcases that self-sabotaging of, pushing things up to the side, don't want to deal with it, and then you find that snowballs and adds. Do you have any examples that maybe come to mind?
Yeah. Well, she talked kind of hand in hand with that self-sabotage is the idea of personal narrative. And, that's, I think for me, there's been this longstanding sort of personal narrative that I've had to fight against of like not being good enough, not being able to start finish. And the examples there are many. And in terms of like where that narrative, where that message comes from, it's I would probably turn this podcast episode into a counseling session, which I'm not sure is exactly what any of us are here for. But, that's just the reality of like recognizing, okay, there's constantly that narrative that I'm having to fight against. And in those moments, like when I fall short, when I fail from hitting a goal, when things don't break the way that I'm hoping, like that's the voice that usually is the first to pop up. It's like, oh, well, that didn't go well because you're you, and you is not good enough. And it's interesting, like how, what she was talking about really resonated, of how easy it is then to kind of fall victim to that voice, to lean into that and just be like, yeah, well, I guess, guess I'm not cut out for this. And so it was a really helpful conversation with her to just think like, no, actually, that narrative only has as much power as I give it, and also depends on what I'm focusing on. Because I could look at just the instances where I've fallen short of what the goal was, but I could also look at all of the other instances where it's like, man, I've accomplished way more, and my life is way better than what I thought it would be. Or if I could go back and tell my 18-year-old self, like, hey, these are all the things that you're doing, and this is the family that you have, and the friends that you have, and the house that you live in, I don't think I would have believed myself, So, it's just interesting, like that personal narrative is so important to identify and to correct, and to, just the stories that we tell ourselves dictate so much about how we process the world around us.
No, that's so good. And I think leaning in a little further to that, and camping for a second on the failure conversation, that's one of those ones that it's fun to have the conversations with our guests, because we've gotten to see on the other side of the failures, and they get to sit there and tell us the success that came through the failures. But when you are knee deep in something that's blowing up in your face, something that isn't working, that is when that those secret words in your mind starts playing tricks on you to say, yeah, you are just a failure. You are just a quitter. You're not good enough. And it's interesting, and again, thinking about that. And I think that's when that self-sabotaging really can come in very quickly. And so I think to be mindful of that as a business owner and an entrepreneur, we all know the classic quote of, well, success is one failure after the next, but you keep going. But it's really hard when you're in that moment and you feel like, oh my gosh, this has not gone according to plan. This is not what I thought it was. This is harder than I thought it would be. It's at that moment when that mind is coming after you. And I know I just said that, but I'm trying to really dig in there, just because I think that's the moment where you get to show what you're made of. And I think as she talked with us, surrounding yourself with the right people, reminding yourself why you're doing that. And that's why I think, press in so much to and end each episode with our guests of what is your why? Because I think your why has to be greater than the potential for failure. And your why has to be the thing that fuels you through those failures, because they are going to come. Sometimes we're not good enough. Sometimes we're not capable enough in our current state. But if we keep going and if we keep grinding, we'll get there. All right, I'm done preaching at you.
No, I love it, man. And I think one of the things that you pulled out there that's just been a consistent theme, I'd say, of the last, well, perhaps all of our guests, but I think it's been a pronounced theme in the past 10 guests, is just how hard it is to grow a successful business. And then even if you have grown a successful business, like how hard it is to live a good life. And so, which is actually, that could be discouraging depending on how you take it, but it's actually been a really good message to hear, and a sobering thing, because again, I feel like a broken record in saying this, but if you're on Instagram or any sort of short form media platform, you just are inundated with messaging of kind of get rich quick, or, if you're a real estate investor, like you start with one and then all of a sudden you got 10 doors and then you got 100 doors and then you got passive income coming out your ears. It's like, that's just not reality. Like it's not just that you for entrepreneurship, like you go on Canva, create a brand, get your web domain, and then all of a sudden you got customers lining up to buy what you're selling. Like it's not reality, despite how many grifters are preaching that online. So it's been good to have real people, real business owners come on and say, we might make it look easy now because we've been doing this so long, but it never was easy, never will be.
No, I love that. And I can speak to my own experience after owning the moving business for over 6 months, 7 months at this point. Even I bought a business that's 20 years old and has 20 years of customers, but yet we are still every day trying to answer the question, how do we get the phones ringing and how do we get the trucks moving? So I totally can relate to that. And it's always, it's work, and it's called work for a reason. I think that's a good segue into our second guest, because we spent some time with Ryan Dice, and man, what a joy that was to have a conversation with this guy who not only has a massive portfolio of businesses that he is overseeing the growth and the scaling of those, but he spends a lot of his time doing coaching as well. And one of the things that really hit me in that conversation, ties into what you're just saying, is that as you play the game of business, there's different mountains to climb. And he talked about how this getting to your first million in revenue, which is what here at Abundant Journey, we're focused on helping you guys, listeners, audience, do. We want to see you get to that $1 million mark, because then you can start implementing some systems, some processes. If you're doing things right financially, you can start to pay yourself a little bit for that hard work. But anyways, all of that said, Ryan was telling us, hey, it's a completely different game and a different mountain that you're climbing, getting to $1 million, than from $1 million to 10 million, and the shifts that happen there.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I loved that conversation. And Ryan really is like a personal hero of mine. I've enjoyed following him online. And that initial resonance with him, right, was the how to scale your business without sacrificing your soul, from a guy that has scaled. What did he say that he was running 3 businesses that were all on like the Inc. 300 or something absurd. Like they were all doing somewhere between 3 and 30 million a year, and he was the head of each of them. And that was such a profound story of him coming in that one night late and realizing like how upset his wife was, how the family balance stuff was all off, and how he needed to make changes. And so even there, it's like, okay, he was making business look easy, but a good life was hard. And so I thought it was a really great conversation about, and got very, very practical about, hey, here's how you actually implement systems that work, that will help you to what you're saying, like that point of like, okay, as you're trying to scale your business, the game does change. The terrain looks totally different. And to handle that, you have to change your systems. You have to change the way that you're playing. Yeah. And so, talking about building those systems was awesome. One of the things that stood out most to me and was a bit contrarian, which I'm always a sucker for, but he really pushed back on the idea of hiring like kind of entry-level workers to take off menial tasks from your plate. He was like, you'd be far better off spending way more and investing in top-level executive leadership kind of talent before you ever hire somebody to do data entry or, like an assistant. I thought that was real good.
I think you're right. And that was one of the big things that came to my mind. I think that's a cheat code for our listeners and for anybody growing a business. And, we oftentimes hear, we'll delegate. And, if you're going to work on your business, not in your business, again, those are quick, easy, flashy statements to make. But the reality of it is that I think oftentimes we can bring in the wrong people. And usually when you say, oh yeah, I brought in the wrong person, the mind says, well, they're not a good fit culture, or they didn't really buy into what you had going on. But he went even more practical and said, no, the wrong fit is the person that is an entry-level person that you now have to babysit, and you have to then do the work, and you have to babysit. So you've given yourself another job instead of actually bringing on a quality person to take some of the responsibilities that are not your strength, but it is their passion and it is their strength. And I love that. I thought that was just a super practical example of a way to grow and scale in that first $1 million mark, but not, like you're saying, sacrificing everything else you're working on.
Yeah. It was great. I hadn't heard anybody else say that. And just the idea too, that like once you're hiring more entry level work, like you change the job that you were doing, which was these kind of low hanging, more menial tasks. Now you're a manager and a manager of people that are doing kind of menial tasks and work. And I think that was just a good awareness to have of that. It's like, okay, there's cost benefit or pros and cons or consequences to every decision that we make in business and in life. And so to really assess what the consequences are. And then, of course, he also just, I think it's one of his superpowers is just how clear of a thinker he is and how well he can clarify complex systems. So the whole idea of just Post-it notes and really getting down to the very basics of business of like, okay, most of the time as businesses grow, they start to take on all of these practices that they don't really understand why it is that they're doing what they're doing. He's like, you kind of just have to go back to the drawing board, put everything, on an actual whiteboard and just say, hey, here's what we're doing for client acquisition. This is what works. This is what doesn't, here's once we've got the client, here's what they move into and how we do fulfillment. And once we do fulfillment, here's how we do follow-up or satisfaction or, how the cycle repeats. And just getting that sort of clarity over, okay, what is it that we actually do here? Kind of that old office space. Like, what would you say you actually do here?
That's right.
I think as business owners, we need to be asking that of ourselves and of our systems to really understand, okay, what's making this whole thing run and work? And therefore, how do we emphasize those strengths and not waste a bunch of time and energy on the things that don't actually contribute to our success?
Yep. And I can tell you that I have already pulled that one for the moving business and started saying, all right, let's strip away all the extra stuff that we're told we need to do and all of the extra things. Because at the end of the day, again, if my guys aren't working, if the trucks aren't running, we're not bringing in money. I mean, that's the nature of my business. And so in that, how do we get customers? Who are our customers? Where do they go? How do we get them? And how do we convert? And that is the simplicity of it. The banker in me in the past life, 6-7 years, bankers love to really complicate everything. And we are masters at that. And I had seen that year over year, but so often, the most successful business owners are the one who simplify and they understand their process. They understand what they're trying to accomplish. And so many times I think we even just forget that. What what are we here for? What do we exist for? Those are some huge ones. I think by and large, just practical, going down the list of practical things to implement in your business. Ryan is one of those episodes that I will be returning back to multiple times. And so I encourage everybody else to do the same. Speaking of practical, one of the ones that we just recently dropped was David Metter out of Atlanta. And this guy is awesome. He has been on the forefront of the automotive industry. And man, that was an awesome conversation. I think one of the things that stood out to me the most was the hurdles that he had before he was even an entrepreneur, before he was even a business owner. He talked with us about how he had this old computer program and was almost like on an Excel spreadsheet creating his own system in following up with clients. And he was blowing everybody out of the water in terms of sales and selling cars. And so much so that it caught the attention of not only his employees, but the owner of the business, and had some things to push back on. What'd you think of that conversation?
Dude, that was great. I really like David. And it was so fascinating to hear him talk about being the first one to set up he was working at a dealership doing car sales, the first one to set up his own PC at his desk. Everybody else is looking at him like, who is this jokester? Until he starts crushing it and becoming the best sales guy. And talking with him about like how the initial response to that was actually management ownership saying that like, hey, you're going to need to take the computer away because it's causing too many problems on the sales floor, despite the fact that it was leading to greater success. And he had this analogy for that, which I actually hadn't heard. I'm sure that most of our listeners who are smarter than me are familiar with it. But that whole idea of like crabs in a bucket, and that you don't have to put a lid on the top of the bucket, because as soon as the crab starts to get towards the top of it, the other crabs in the bucket will pull them back down. Yeah. And again, that was just a really great insight on human nature, unfortunately, as we have people within our organizations or within the world even that try to advance and push the ball forward. You know, we'll try and get Elon Musk on in 2025, but I think it'd be really interesting question to ask about his experience with the crabs in the bucket, and as he's been on the forefront of so many things, like the number of people that are trying to pull him back. But I just think that that's a good thing for entrepreneurs to recognize. Like, the spirit of entrepreneurship is usually identifying problems and figuring out how to solve them, and yet we encounter so much resistance as we try to make those positive changes, and to recognize that that's just part of the game. Like it's a feature, not a bug, something to be expected whenever you're trying to push the ball forward. But what were some of your takeaways there?
I totally agree with that. And I think the more and more I look around, we as humans tend to gravitate toward the herd mentality. Mm-hmm. And we tend to want to go, we don't want to stand out too much, for better or for worse. But the very nature of, I think, entrepreneurship oftentimes is you're the one that doesn't fit in. I mean, how many times have we heard that with, our guests of, I didn't fit in school. I was being creative early on at different unique ways to make money. I think that mindset and those desires are different oftentimes for business owners and entrepreneurs, because you have to be willing to subject yourself to a lot of misery and pain and failure along the way. But, and going with that herd mentality and that crabs in the bucket mentality, people don't like it when you stand out, because I think it either brings up insecurities or fears within themselves. It can bring jealousy that you're doing something or willing to do something that they are not willing to do themselves. Yeah. And it's one of those things that without intentionally doing it, when you bring success and you rise above everybody else, it just inevitably puts a mirror with people on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not your intention. I mean, you're focused on your goals, you're focused on your business, you're focused on being successful, but that mirror really makes them take a hard look. And so a lot of times people just aren't willing to do that. And so I think David experienced that early on, but I think that's something to be very mindful of as we're growing and working on our businesses, that we're going to meet resistance, and we're going to not only, again, this is one of those things of, you got failure that you got to contend with. You got to struggle with other competition in the market. Oh, and on top of all of that, you have people who you would expect to be the most supportive of you. Those are the actual people who oftentimes will throw unnecessary or unwanted shots at you. And I don't say that to discourage anybody, but I think we continue to try to lean into the fact that there's so much flashiness, like you were saying, with social media and all in the world today, of how amazing it is to be an entrepreneur. It is a less worn path for a reason. It's worth it. And we've had now almost 2 years of conversations with folks who have taken their success and turn around and make a difference in their communities and in their families, and been the ones to break these multi-generational cycles. But yet it is a difficult path.
Yeah, man. No, it's and yeah, that's that sobering reality that I've really appreciated that we've gotten from a lot of our guests, and that the more I think that your business scales, the more that you get into it. Like, I don't know that it ever does get easier, because it's like the old classic video games. Like, you beat one level, you beat one boss, one of Bowser's little minions, and it's like the reward for that is that you move on to the next level where the course is harder and there's more of the Guptas that are trying to get you, and it was just interesting, like in the conversation with David, like ultimately the dealership came around to him using his computer, and before long, everybody on the sales floor was using computers, and then he's on to the next challenge of, okay, how do I build a CRM system? And then he's forming partnerships and figuring out funding. A lot of really difficult lessons learned in how to find the right investors. Then even when having the right investors, like fumbling his way through a business that was extremely intensive in terms of overhead, because he had to have trainers that were teaching all these dealerships across the country how to use this new software and platform. And ultimately, like that didn't quite go as well as he had hoped. And it just seems like, okay, if you're waiting for things to get easier, you're going to be waiting a long time, perhaps your entire life. And so it's better to just embrace the challenges, the difficulties. But the upshot of that, right, is that, again, just knowing that that's where all of the growth is in facing those challenges. That's where you get the level ups.
Well, I think you're right. And if the listener or watcher on YouTube says, oh, well, you guys are just filled with joy here in January about how it's going to take longer and it's going to be harder. And, I'm going to get smacked in the face by people who I think love me. Yeah, no, we're saying that. No, I'm just kidding. I think ultimately we want to paint that reality, but, and that's a big capital B there, but we lean in because the why is so much greater than the reality of anything else. And that is what has been rocket fuel for our audience, or for our guests that we have had for 2 years now, episode after episode. And that really reminds me of our conversation with Robert Mallon, who had spent 25 years in the restaurant industry and was looking for a change, and had met with a business coach, and through his journey realized that he was meant to be a business coach. And so he found his why. And I tie that back into what we're saying here, because at the end of the day, what is it that keeps us going as business owners and entrepreneurs? Sometimes it's the allurement of riches. Sometimes it's the allurement of time freedom. But I even think within those, there has to be a deeper why. There has to be a deeper purpose and a deeper meaning behind taking those licks and taking those shots that we've been talking about here. And I think Robert really spelled that out so beautifully.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, he was challenged kind of at the end of his career in the restaurant industry. I can't remember exactly who the friend was or what the circumstances were, but he was just asked that question by somebody that he trusted. Why are you here? Like, what's your mission? What are you doing all this for? And I think it was through really wrestling with that question that he came away with I'm here to inspire and teach and encourage. Like, I'm here to help people identify their purpose and their mission. And he answered that call by making a huge shift. And that can be a really scary thing.
Yeah.
But, if you're willing to do the work and wrestle with those hard questions of like, why am I here? What am I all about? The difficulty is when you get the answer to that question, you do have this decision moment of then, okay, like now that I know what I'm here to do, am I going to continue on doing anything other than that mission, that thing that I feel most called to and passionate about? Yeah. Or am I going to leave what's comfortable and go out and figure out, just keep on pushing until like I'm living in accordance with my own purpose? And that wasn't again, the theme here wasn't an easy road for him, but it's been an incredibly rewarding path that he has taken.
Well, and the rewarding path, I don't know that we talk a lot about this here on the show, but you're absolutely right. What is the reason that all of our guests have continued to lean into? I mean, there's different things ultimately. I mean, we ask them typically in our golden nuggets, hey, what's a dream or goal that you have? But I think ultimately what unifies everybody is just this recognition that I don't want to be complacent. I don't want to settle, but I want to make a difference. And that could be in my own life. That could be in my family's life. That could be in my friends' lives. That could be in the community that I'm building. That could be in my neighborhood. That could be in donating bikes and building bikes for folks, or, delivering water to people in need. I think we recognize that there's something in each of our guests and in this entrepreneurial spirit that says, I want to make and leave the world a better place than how I found it. And so I think that goes back, at least in my mind, to, hey, why do we willfully subject ourselves to the pain and the punishment of being entrepreneurs? But it is that why. And I've just have loved that, always hearing that from our guests. But I think you're right. Robert really said it well and spelled it out well, that once that why for him was figured out, it was a turning point. It was a decision in his life that he made, and he never looked back. And he and so many of our other guests have said, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't make that decision at that moment. I wouldn't have done the things I've done, and I wouldn't be the person that I am today if I hadn't been willing to take that step. And I think that maybe is a good place to land the plane here pretty quick, simply looking into 2025, right? As we say, hey, we get to reflect on 2 years of episodes, and we get to reflect on, we're almost at that 100th episode mark, which is such an exciting milestone for you and I. But to be able to look on and really kind of encourage anybody checking this out, anybody hanging out with us today, to ask that why. I mean, what would your maybe message be going into the new year here?
Yeah, one of the quotes that Robert shared with us, and I don't know if it was original to him. Let's say yes, just because it's profound and he's a profound person. But he said, "Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain." I think that's a really good line. Facing fears is not easy. It wasn't easy as a kid. It's not easy as an adult, and yet it is in facing those fears that we do really become the people that I think we're supposed to be, meant to be. Our businesses grow into being the businesses that they're meant to be, and the ones that can serve our communities best. And so I think that that's really something that I want to carry with me, and would encourage our listeners to carry with them into 2025, is like, hey, whatever that thing is that scares you, that you feel afraid of, gear up to take that on this year. And I just, it really is crazy how consistently, when people face their fears, they do come out of those battles victorious. Even if it's a gruesome battle. I'm not saying that it's not gonna, just face it and it'll be fun and light and easy. That's not what I'm saying at all. It may well be a gruesome battle against the fear, but it is kind of crazy the way life goes, and that you usually come out of those situations as a conqueror.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me, I think I said, I haven't pulled this one out for a long time. I love Robert's quote, and it's probably better than the one that I'm about to share, but it's everything you want is on the other side of fear. And I think that speaks to the growth and the change that we go through as people when we face those fears. It doesn't always look like what we think it's going to look like. And in fact, I would probably make the argument, most of the time, it doesn't look like what we think it will look like, but oftentimes it's so much better. And now we're not advocating for, stupid fear facing, running and sprinting into bad decisions. We've had a lot of wisdom around that as well, or partnering with people that you shouldn't be partnered with. But ultimately, I think the sentiment and the spirit behind what you're sharing is spot on, of looking into the year ahead, really having a clear why. That is the rocket fuel, past the challenges, past the difficulties, past the heartache. But then on top of that, being willing to take those massive steps of action, being willing to overcome fear is going to inevitably land you much further than you thought you ever could go.
Yeah, for sure, man. No, it's really, really good. And I think that one of the most helpful elements in facing those fears is doing so in the context of community, having that accountability and encouragement around you. Entrepreneurship, business leadership, that can be a lonely game. And I think that that's underneath, like, it's kind of the heartbeat of everything that we do with this podcast and with Abundant Journey. And that's one of the things that I'm most excited about for 2025 as well. I know that we've been doing a lot of looking back, but when it comes to like that practical, okay, face your fears, well, it's a whole lot easier to do when we do it together. Yeah. And so I'm eager to see the ways that the Abundant Journey community will grow, and how we can support one another as entrepreneurs and business leaders to do those hard things and encourage one another when the going gets rough. So I'm very excited about what's in store for all of us.
Yeah. Man, that's a great way to end this thing. And listeners, audience, you guys are here. Thank you for hanging out with us for 2 years. Thank you for continuing to show up. Also provide feedback and provide other guests to bring on We love conversations if you haven't figured that out at this point, and we love learning from those who have been successful before us. And so let's keep the conversations rolling as we sprint ahead into 2025. We're going to continue to document our journeys, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because our goal is to be transparent with you guys as we are implementing these things. And maybe just a quick plug before we wrap this thing up. If you're just listening to this, but you're never taking any action, and maybe not even us, but you're listening, you're reading books, you're listening to all these different kinds of things of advice, but you're not taking time to implement it, then it's just head knowledge, and you're never going to change the trajectory, or you're never going to be able to accomplish those goals. You have to start taking steps. So yes, listen, yes, learn, then evaluate, which is, I think we've spent some time talking about evaluating today, and finally, go get after it. Here's to a 2025. Thank you all for hanging out with us. As always, like, share, leave a review, and send us an email. Let us know if you got anybody else we should be talking with. We will see you next week.